Some of the most emotionally intelligent people don't feel confident at all. They feel slow. Sometimes emotional intelligence doesn't look like confidence or charisma. It looks like hesitation before you reply. A quiet awareness that something beneath the words matters more. There's a form of emotional intelligence that operates through pattern recognition, not expression. And most people don't recognize it while they're living it. You notice patterns others miss. How certain jokes tighten your chest. How silence can say more than explanations. And how your reactions change depending on who's in front of you. You might have wondered if this means you're overly sensitive or unsure of yourself. But what if these subtle responses aren't flaws at all? What if they're hidden patterns revealing how deeply you understand emotions, including your own, even when you don't talk about it? You might recognize this in small, ordinary moments. You sense tension in a room before anyone raises their voice. You replay a conversation not because you're insecure, but because you're tracking what felt off. You adjust how you speak around different people, not to please them, but because you instinctively read emotional context. Sometimes this makes you feel tired, like you're carrying extra information others don't seem to notice. You may have been told you're too thoughtful, too careful, or that you take things too seriously. In group settings, you might stay quiet, observing how dynamics unfold, while inside, you're already mapping who feels unheard or uneasy. In close relationships, you often anticipate needs before they're expressed, then wonder why others don't do the same for you. And sometimes you don't speak up, not because you're unsure, but because you're already calculating the emotional cost of being misunderstood. These experiences can leave you questioning yourself, unsure whether this sensitivity is a strength or something you should tone down. Yet these patterns keep showing up, quietly shaping how you move through the world. Most people are taught to see these behaviors as overthinking, people-pleasing, or a lack of confidence. But that interpretation misses something important. Emotional intelligence isn't only about expressing feelings clearly or staying calm under pressure. It's also about perception, the ability to register emotional information before it becomes obvious. When you pause, reflect, or adapt, you're not failing to act. You're processing. Your mind is taking in tone, timing, and emotional impact all at once. That can look like hesitation from the outside, but internally, it's integration. In psychology, this isn't considered overthinking. It's called depth of processing. Instead of reacting on impulse, you're allowing multiple signals to settle before responding. This reframes the story from "something is wrong with me" to "something in me is paying attention." The very patterns you may have judged as weakness are often signs of an internal system designed for understanding, not dominance. Emotional intelligence, in this sense, is quiet competence. It doesn't rush to prove itself. It prioritizes accuracy over speed. This happens because emotionally intelligent minds tend to scan for meaning, not just facts. While some people register only what's being said, you also pick up on how it's said, when it's said, and what's left unsaid. It's similar to listening to music. You don't just hear the lyrics. You notice the rhythm, the pauses, the shifts in volume. Your brain is constantly cross-checking emotional cues to understand the full picture. That takes more time and energy, which is why your responses can feel slower or more measured. It's not confusion, it's depth. Your system is designed to reduce emotional error, not to react fast. By the time you speak or act, you've already considered impact, context, and consequence. This mechanism protects relationships and prevents unnecessary conflict, even if it sometimes makes you feel out of sync with faster, more impulsive reactions around you. The conflict starts when this depth meets a world that rewards speed and certainty. You may think, "Why do I need so much time to respond?" Or, "Why does this affect me more than it seems to affect others?" In decisions, you might feel torn between what makes logical sense and what feels emotionally aligned, replaying both until you're drained. In relationships, you can struggle with boundaries, not because you don't have them, but because you can see everyone's perspective at once. That awareness can turn inward, creating self-doubt. You might silence yourself to avoid misalignment, or wait too long to speak, then regret not expressing something earlier. Over time, this pattern can make you question your instincts, even though they're usually accurate. The inner tension isn't about lack of confidence. It's about holding too much emotional data at the same time, without a clear signal for when it's safe to release it. The most confusing part is how this can feel like losing yourself. You're so aware of emotional undercurrents that your own needs can blur into the background. You might ask yourself, "Do I really want this? Or am I just responding to the situation?" This creates a subtle sense of instability, as if your identity shifts depending on context. At times, you may feel emotionally exhausted without knowing why, or strangely disconnected after interactions that seemed fine on the surface. There's also the fear of being misunderstood, of having depth that never fully translates into words. When your internal world is rich but invisible, it can feel lonely. You may even envy people who act without second guessing, assuming their certainty means clarity. Yet the suffering here doesn't come from emotional intelligence itself. It comes from not recognizing it, and from trying to live as if your sensitivity should operate like someone else's simplicity. If this is resonating, take a moment and breathe. Nothing here means you're broken or behind in life. The fact that you're able to recognize these patterns already says something important about you. Emotional intelligence often develops quietly, shaped by experience rather than praise. You didn't imagine these reactions, and you didn't choose them by accident. They're responses formed through attention and care. You're not late to understanding yourself. You're arriving. And you don't need to fix this part of you to move forward. You just need language for it. Awareness creates space. It allows you to separate who you are from what you've been managing internally for years. Right now, simply noticing that these patterns exist is enough. You're not alone in this experience, even if it's rarely talked about. Many people carry this kind of intelligence silently, wondering why it feels heavier than it looks. This pattern can be understood as emotional pattern recognition. It's the ability to detect shifts, inconsistencies, and unspoken feelings before they become explicit. Instead of reacting only to events, you respond to emotional trajectories. You sense where a conversation is heading, not just where it is. This pattern repeats across situations. In friendships, you notice distance forming early. At work, you feel tension before conflict arises. And in yourself, you catch emotional changes before they overwhelm you. Because this awareness is internal and subtle, it often goes unnamed. Without a label, it's easy to misinterpret it as anxiety, indecision, or sensitivity. But naming it changes your relationship with it. Once you see it as a form of intelligence rather than a personal flaw, it becomes easier to work with. You're not reacting too much. You're perceiving more. And perception, when understood, can become a choice rather than a burden. The shift begins when you stop trying to reduce your awareness and start learning how to guide it. Emotional intelligence doesn't disappear. It reorganizes. With understanding, what once felt overwhelming can become grounding. You begin to trust that noticing more doesn't mean you must carry more. You can observe without absorbing. This doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't require becoming less caring. It's a gradual recalibration, where your attention becomes intentional instead of automatic. You start to recognize which emotional signals deserve action and which only need acknowledgement. That discernment brings relief. Life becomes less about constant internal management and more about choice. You're no longer at the mercy of every shift in energy around you. Instead, your awareness becomes a tool you can set down when needed. At its healthiest, emotional intelligence doesn't keep you hyper-alert. It gives you flexibility. One helpful step is giving yourself permission to pause without self-judgment. When emotional information comes in, you don't need to respond immediately or resolve it. Naming what you're sensing, silently or in writing, can prevent it from turning into tension. Another gentle practice is checking whether an emotion is yours to carry or simply something you've perceived. That distinction matters. You can also experiment with responding in smaller, simpler ways instead of fully explaining yourself. Emotional intelligence doesn't require over-translation, and creating moments of emotional quiet, like walks, music, brief disconnection, helps your system reset. These practices don't reduce your sensitivity. They organize it. Over time, you begin to feel less drained by your awareness and more supported by it. The goal isn't to become less emotionally intelligent. It's to let that intelligence work with you instead of against you. When you look back at everything through this lens, the title takes on a different meaning. The hidden patterns aren't random habits or personal quirks. They're signals of how your mind and emotions work together. Your pauses, your sensitivity to contexto, your awareness of what goes unspoken. All of these point to emotional intelligence that developed beneath the surface. You were never lacking clarity. You were processing it internally. Understanding this allows you to stop fighting your nature and start refining it. Emotional intelligence isn't about being endlessly available or endlessly patient. It's about staying connected to yourself while staying aware of others. Small shifts like adjusting your timing, honoring your limits, letting some signals pass without action, create real change. Nothing about this requires you to become someone else. It simply asks you to recognize what's already there and treat it with respect. What once felt confusing can now feel coherent. If one of these patterns felt uncomfortably familiar, you're not the only one. Naming it, even briefly, can change how it feels. If you feel comfortable, share that insight in the comments. Putting words to it can make it feel more real and less isolating. And if this video resonated, leave your like here. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive more content like this. Thank you for spending this time here and for listening to yourself a little more closely than before. See you next time.